Hey guys, welcome to week 1 of Social Studies, the Renaissance. Today I'm going to walk you through the task that helps you make a museum exhibit. First thing I want to do is actually go over the task with you. The task itself is set up so that you know how that you're going to be successful. For instance, if you go through, it says to gain a deeper understanding of the Renaissance time period. You've already studied this in school, but this is just for your purpose of review and to see what you can remember. Now each step has lines beside it. I believe it's really important to know how to be successful. So every time you complete a step, if you will check that off, that way you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go down to the bottom of the box. And you're going to see that on this bottom page there are 6 boxes. One for Italy and the Medici family, one for humanism, one for the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Shakespeare. And what I want you to do is to write anything that you remember about any of those topics into the boxes. For instance, if I was doing this, I would write Italy is a peninsula. We know that it's surrounded on 3 sides by water. If I was going to the Renaissance, I might say it started in Italy. Shakespeare, greatest English playwright of all times. So my goal would be just to write anything that I remember. Now it's really okay if you don't have anything to write down there. It's okay, but try really hard to write down what you know. The second step would be to read the attached information and annotate as you read. So there are 2 pages attached to the actual task sheet. Just takes you through some really quick reminders of what we learned during that time, all about each one of those 6 topics: Italy, humanism, Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Shakespeare. The third step is to choose topics. Which 3 of those, which 2 of those do you plan on completing? Complete the museum topic pages. We'll get to that at the end, and I'll show you that in just a minute of actually how you go through that. I also have some completed ones to show you so you kind of know what you're looking for. You can make it creative and interesting. You can put the sheets together to create a museum exhibit and then lead your family around it. It really helps if you talk through your exhibit and because you're sharing with others and they're learning something from that as well. Now, some optional suggestions that I have from you are to take the pages on cereal boxes or other items, and when I show you my small exhibit, you'll find that I used any boxes of any kind that I found in the house. Game boxes, juice drink boxes, whatever I could find to make my exhibit. You can also make a 3D representation of the topics and add it to the side. For instance, if you choose to do Leonardo da Vinci, you could put an airplane beside him because he came up with the first idea for a flying machine. You can make a name of your museum and add it to your museum exhibit. So for instance, I called mine, and you'll see that, I called mine Miss Letzinger's Renaissance Museum. Then you complete more exhibit pages. Of course, the more exhibits pages that you complete, the more interesting that it will be. Now this is supposed to be fun, but it's also supposed to be learning and again, sharing of what you already know. So again, as you go down through here, you'll see that all of the topics are underlined and they're ready there for you. There are also some extra resources at the bottom, and these resources are for you to use if you need more information, if you have access to the internet. There's lots of extra things out there, but these are just 2 that I pulled out if you wanted a little bit more information. So what I'm going to do is I'm really just going to start by going through some of this information and sharing it with you. The first thing I want to remind you of is the map of Europe. For quite a while, even before the Renaissance, we were studying this map of Europe. We talked about William the Conqueror here in England. We talked about the Reconquista and the Inquisition here in Spain. We've talked about a lot. If you remember correctly, the Alps are right here. We have all of this area that we have been discussing for quite a while. Where we're really discussing is down through this area in Italy. Now, as I said before, you guys know that Italy is a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by water. We have a sea here. We have the Mediterranean Sea. We have the Adriatic Sea right here. We know that we have the Papal States. If you don't remember, the Papal has to do with the Pope. That's where the Pope lived. We have Venice, the port city that made its fortune from being a port city, being a shipbuilding city. We have Florence, which is really kind of our discussion of the Renaissance today, because this is where the Renaissance started, along with the Medici family. Now, the interesting part about Italy was it was here on the Mediterranean Sea. And so all of the ships on any trading route would have come, for the most part, through the Mediterranean Sea to be able to reach Europe and Africa and different parts of different countries. And that's where they sold their goods all over the world. Now, our first topic that we really want to discuss, if you look at your listing, is really about Florence and the Medici family. The Medici family owned majority of Florence. They owned the bank, They owned the wool. They were rulers of the city. Many of them came and became priests or queens or went on to become very, very famous. So one of the most famous pictures, and this is a real picture if you'll see it, for Florence. This picture was photographed around 1890 to 1900, so it's a little over 100 years old. This is the cathedral, basically, that the Medicis had built. This dome was famous for its time. It's still famous. It is on the inside. It is painted. Been in many movies, been in videos. Many of you guys have seen this in class and possibly not in class as well, just in something that you may see on TV. Of course, the Medici family, this is Lorenzo Medici. He is the one who kind of started a lot of this. He didn't start all of it, but he did start a lot of this. He actually governed, and you can look here on your paper, he governed France from 1469 to 1492. So he was really the governor. He took care of Florence for many, many years. I think I said France. I'm sorry, it was Florence. And he used his wealth. He supported the arts. He supported architects. He supported writers. He really brought artistry and education to his city. If you remember, Italy had city-states, and they competed with each other to see who could build bigger and better. Well, the Medicis had the money to do that. And so they continued to build bigger and better, including the cathedral we just saw, as well as they started with all of the art. And basically, Florence became the cultural center of the Italian Renaissance. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is Da Vinci. Now, many of you guys know about Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was known as the Renaissance man. He was known as famous for doing majority of everything. He had talent for a little bit of everything. This is his first sketch. This is a flying machine. He was one of the first people that we know of to ever have an idea for an invention of a flying machine. He never followed through with it. The materials weren't available at the time, but he did sketch it. He also painted this picture right here. This is one of the most famous pictures in the world. This is called The Last Supper. The interesting part about this is that it brings your eye to the center. And if you see right here right here in the center, it's called perspective. And he draws your eye in to where that you see the picture of Jesus with the disciples on each side. And once you see on the inside, then you can begin to look outward at the rest of the disciples. And so this was his picture. It's been copied many, many times. But it is one of the most famous paintings in the world, and really what he's known for. These are two other pictures. He was hired to paint a scene for the Church of San Francesco Grande. This is called Madonna of the Rocks. This is another famous portrait made around 1483 of his. Now, the other famous portrait that many of you guys know that he painted was the Mona Lisa. Now, the Mona Lisa has lots of, you all have seen, there's movies about it and all sorts of different discussions about it, but this is one of his most famous paintings. Today it hangs in the Louvre Museum in Paris, France. The next person we're going to talk about is we really want to talk about Michelangelo. You can't really talk about Da Vinci and Renaissance artists without talking about Michelangelo. Now, one of the most important facts to remember that I think personally is interesting is that Michelangelo actually lived with the Medici family. To kind of tie things in together, they were a patron of his. The Medicis would pay people to do their art. So what that allowed these artists to do was to work without having to worry about food or shelter or making money. And so all they did was artwork. The Medici family also, as we move into the scientific revolution, they also knew Galileo. Galileo was actually tutor for the Medici family, just again to tie it all back together. This is one of the most famous paintings, quite possibly in the world. This is the top of the Sistine Chapel. Now, the Sistine Chapel sits in the Vatican in Rome, Italy, the place where the Pope lives. And the Pope asked Michelangelo to paint the ceiling of this beautiful building, which I'll show you in the building in just a second. This, however, is one of the most famous pictures in the Sistine Chapel. This is at the moment that God, the man on the right, is getting ready to breathe life into Adam by touching him. If you look at the pictures, though, they're amazing. You can see the muscles in Adam's arms. You can see the lifelike and the realism, which is such a change from the Middle Ages when things were very flat and there was no movement in those pictures. Now, I want to show you this. This is the Sistine Chapel. These are the paintings that Michelangelo painted. He painted the top. He did have people that helped him, but he is known for painting the top And if you want to go back and look at where this is and be able to take kind of a virtual tour yourself, this is where on the task paper that I gave you the website to go do that. And so if you look up in the very top, you can see a little under halfway down, you can see this same picture right here of God breathing life into Adam. Now, all of these are Bible stories. There are over 300 people. They are all very real to life, as far as almost looks like they could jump off at the page at you, which is one of the things that Michelangelo was known as. Now, he didn't really like to paint. One of his favorite things to do was to sculpt. One of his most famous sculptures is the David, and many of you guys were able to see this in class, or you've seen this someplace else. This is, of course, in a museum today. So this was made out of a very tall, thin piece of marble. It was sculpted by Michelangelo. Again, keep in mind, this is marble, and so very hard. And you can look and see the muscles in his body, the muscles in his arm, the ringlets in his hair. And if you could get closer, you could almost see the determination in his eyes. This is the moment where David is deciding before he slayed the giant Goliath. It shows that he's determined, courageous, and a bit fearful, because if you look in his eyes, there is just a little bit of fear there as well. Confidence, yes, but fear as well. This is one of the most famous statues, again, stands 13 feet tall, that Michelangelo completed. Now, he completed one other statue that I don't have a picture of for you, that I think is pretty neat. The picture is, the sculpture, I'm sorry, is called, it's the Pieta, and it is of Mary right after Jesus was taken off the cross, and she's holding Jesus. And this statue has been recreated by many artists over time, and it looks very real. And the interesting part about this is that he actually signed his name to that statue. He never signed his name to statues, but that one he did. So it's an interesting piece of history as far as Michelangelo goes. Now, the last person we really want to talk about as far as being a real Renaissance artist was Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare was not from Italy. So as we've been talking about Michelangelo, and as we've been talking about Da Vinci, they're both in the Medici family. They're both in this area. They were all in this area. Here's Florence. You've got Milan, Venice. They're all from in this area and continued to go from Rome to Florence. And they would move throughout there doing different artworks as they were commissioned. However, Shakespeare was from England. He was born in a city called Stratford-upon-Avon, about 100 miles or so outside of London, England, right here. And so he did not have very much to do necessarily with Michelangelo and others. However, because he kind of came out of this time period, and he's one of the most famous English playwrights, we do talk about him during this Renaissance time period. Now, Shakespeare wrote about 37 plays. You can see this picture, and this is a book called The First Folio. It's a collection of Shakespeare's plays put together by his fellow actors. Shakespeare was an actor. He was an actor in what's called the Chamberlain's Men, Lord Chamberlain's Men, and they acted at a place called the Globe Theatre in London. Now, he was an actor, but he also wrote the plays. Most of his plays were based on history. There were tragedies, there were comedy. It was based on English, history, and what he had learned in school, and then what he had learned later in life. Again, he was an actor. The interesting part about that time period, just as an aside, there were no women actors. They were all men. So men played both the women and men parts. Now, Shakespeare wrote so many different plays, and he also wrote some sonnets, that he is credited with being the second most quoted literature in the world after the Bible. As you grow up and as you go through school, you will be reading some of Shakespeare's plays. You probably already have heard of Romeo and Juliet. So many spin-offs, even if you think of the movie, Romeo and Juliet. If you've ever watched both, you'll see some similarities. Hamlet, Macbeth, a lot of those that you have probably heard of. So that kind of gives you an overall task or an overall view of what you talked about. Now, there's lots more that we could go back on. We could talk about Donatello. We could talk about a little bit more about humanism and how that made people believe more in themselves. We could talk more about Italy itself and about Florence. But as just being an overview and trying to give you information, I just want to hit the really high kind of fun spots when it came to learning this material. Now, the end result is a museum exhibit, as I said. And so if you don't have enough information from the reading, you can always go back and rewatch this video and learn just a little bit more about the topics. But if you look here, what your goal is to write the topic here. You can choose any of those 6 topics: the Renaissance, humanism, Italy and the Medicis, or you could even split it up, do Italy and then do the Medicis, Shakespeare, Leonardo, Da Vinci, and Michelangelo. But it's really important to tie all of the information we learned kind of back to what our point is. So we really want to talk about and look at why they were so important. So the questions you really need to answer are, what are their major accomplishments? When did it take place? And as we talked about, almost all of this took place in Italy. There were some exceptions, of course. Draw an illustration. Doesn't mean draw the person, it means draw an illustration of what they're best known for. I'll show you my example here in just a minute. Analyze the impact of the topic on the Renaissance. Because our discussion is the Renaissance, we want to make sure, and I'll tie it back to how did they impact the Renaissance. Now, you've been given a few pages in with your packet. One of the things that I suggest, if you enjoy this, is to make some more that you didn't have copies for. And I'll explain what I mean here in just a second. So what I want to do is I want to show you my topic, my museum that I created, kind of show you what I did a little bit with what I was given, but also kind of how I made my own. And then that way you have time then to work on yours. So the first thing I want to show you is here is my topic on Leonardo. And so I don't want you to copy mine, of course, but I do want you to look at it and you can kind of look and see. I tried to make it as colorful as possible. I tried to use complete sentences and correct grammar just so that we can practice those as we go along. This is that flying machine. I am not an artist, but I wanted to put it up there, and I even wrote a caption. He had ideas for a flying machine in his sketches because he made those sketches. I have the topic up here. I have his impact on the Renaissance, and I have what I thought the most interesting thing was about him. And the most interesting thing I have is that the study of anatomy. I thought the study of anatomy was one of the most important things that he did. I don't think I mentioned it, but he cut open dead bodies with permission, and he would sketch muscles and bones, and was one of the first people to do so. Now, as I told you, I wanted to make myself a museum exhibit title. So let's pull this down just a little bit. So I have this, and I just made this. So I would put this if I was going to have my family, which my family's actually already looked at these, and this would be kind of my topic. So I could call this the Mona Lisa's in the Louvre. Well, these exhibits are in Miss Letzinger's museum. Now, I have mine on the back of a juice box. So this isn't anything you need to go out and buy anything for. You have every material that you need. The other one that I did, just to show you how you could do it, is I made my own exhibit paper because I ran out. You know, if you have 2 and you want to do more, it's probably a good thing to practice as much as you can and to review this material. And many of you out there love the art and really enjoyed this topic. So I made my own. I made it very colorful. It doesn't have to look like the original. I still did all of the things on there. I still drew the picture of the Medici Bank. I still did all of the things that are there on the original. Well, I hope you learned something, or I hope you remembered something that you had maybe forgotten over time. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that your family learns a lot, that you enjoy this. And thanks for watching. Bye.